Welcome back, MHP Nation. Ferd here with another episode of the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast. My guest today, pleased to bring to you, he's a big-time national MHP broker, got a good team. They're selling deals all over the country. He runs the Esterson team, the Esterson MHC team out of Marcus and Millichaps. Please welcome my guest, Glenn Esterson.
Hey, thanks for having me on here.
You got it, Glenn. Thanks for being here. Well, tell us a little about yourself. I know you, but our viewers may not. They probably do. But tell us how you got into the MHP space and a little bit about your background so we can kind of get to know you a little better.
Sure. So I'm Glenn Esterson. I've been doing brokerage for 20-something years now, and stumbled into my first park back in 2003 or 4. Having no idea what I was getting into. And, I've been in this industry a long time, and I've brokered hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of deals. And, nowadays, me and my team, we kind of run around, the United States selling parks. We typically sell, 1, 2, 3 parks a week. And, we kind of are a shoe for every foot type of thing. I'll sell a park for $300,000 one day and then sell a park for $30 million the next day. And we deal with, straight land lease communities, and we deal with a lot of park-owned home communities and everything in between. So, we typically get around. This year alone, we transacted in 15 states so far. My team is a very small team. We're only, a total of seven of us, and a couple of them are support and not agents. And, we've been having a good time. And our big thing, the way that we approach this whole sales thing and who we're bringing buyers to is with this kind of ethical implication about being a park owner and dealing with affordable housing and low income tenants. And we are very careful of the type of buyer we bring in that isn't going to squeeze the tenant for, a 200% rent hike on day one or something like that. And we focus very much on, achieving the highest possible market pricing and still getting this kind of buyer that understands, what we kind of coined as the empathetic capitalist type of approach. And it's a mouthful, and some people call it compassionate capitalism. We think an empathy approach is even better than a compassionate approach. And so we kind of outline our strategies on how to achieve upside before squeezing the tenant. For us, we're big on infill, and then we're big on filling vacant homes, and then the infill, and then the expansion before you even really discuss pressing rents. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. Been doing this a long time. I've been on the extreme other end of life where it was very much a struggle, and I was very poor, and a bunch of us living in a 1,000 square foot house with 1 bathroom and raising kids on my own and all that kind of stuff. And I got into manufactured housing by total accident about a park because I needed to, I was a farmer at the time, and I was brokering, but brokering a deal or two here and there. Another broker came to me and said, "Hey, I got a great opportunity for you. It's up in this tiny little town you've never heard of, and it's a trailer park," and that's what we called it back then. Saying I don't want anything to do with that. And for 6 months it haggled with me until I finally bowed to his pressure and bought the park. And learned real quickly that like that's the hardest business a man can get into. It was all park-owned homes, and it was all a D- type of park and a D- type of location. And it was making me my 10-12%, but I was working for every nickel and dime of that thing.
Yeah.
And, after a couple of years of getting the hang of it, I finally got the hang of it, and then the recession came and went through that thing, and taught me a whole new level of understanding how poor people can be and how desperate times can get, and it really changed my approach to just about everything with this industry. Then I started brokering parks, full time, and here I am today, and like I said, I saw a lot of deals.
That's great. No, I like your method there, the ethical approach. I think that's definitely the way to go. What we do when we buy parks is we do a lot of the upgrades and stuff and pour a bunch of CapEx into the park before we even think about a rent raise. We're having the pro forma a rent raise at some point, but I feel like it's easy to raise rents and be way below market because there's some people up there that are raising them so much. I've got a park here in my metro that I'm at 375. The big players are at 525. And I'm like, okay, I can get there $25 a piece, I'll get there at some point. I'm not going to go $200. And it was a big infill. I brought in 49 homes in the last year, just one park. So it's like, I'm going to make value add by bringing in homes and then ancillary services, like people want a shed, people want pets, some of those sort of add-on costs without having to jack the rent up, especially on the folks that have been there for 25 years.
Legacy tenants, you got to protect these guys, man. Like they're not there because they want necessarily to be there. They're because there wasn't a lot of options for them, and this was the most affordable option for them. You got to be really cognizant of that, you know. And like, yeah, $500 market rent would be nice, and your cash flow great. Then get the new guy. Get the new guy at $500. Bring a nice home in. Get the new guy at $500, and help your legacy tenants, you know, catch their breath, you know, because there's been a lot of turnover in our industry this last few years, and these guys have probably already gone through a pretty heavy rent press a lot of the times.
Right, and I feel like the guys that are jacking the rents up that bad, they're going to ruin it for everybody because
legislation's coming. We're having regulations definitely coming downstream, man. I mean, it's a fact of life. Capitalism will devour itself, and hammer capitalism, all about that money. But at the same time, you know, unbridled capitalism, it devours itself, man. You know, and so the government's going to step in because, you know, people are going to start raising a fuss when there's no more affordable options in a town for somebody, you know, and that's, you know, easier to regulate ourselves and put these kind of cautionary tales in place and like, you know, we don't do this and we don't do that and we help improve this and we help improve that. We're going to have a much easier time in the long run with this industry. And I think we'll be able to live with this stuff a little bit better. I mean, what's $25 to you is nothing, and what's $25 to them is a whole lot of something sometimes, you know.
Right. And 25 is one thing, but I'm under contract right now in Des Moines, and they're in the parks at like 280. The market is anywhere between 400 and 650. So I'm like, okay, I want to be able to get from 280 and get up to 400 in a few years. But if these other guys keep pushing it, there's now rent control talks every year in the last couple of years in Iowa. If they go to 700, 800, there's gonna be rent control. I'm gonna be stuck at 280 forever. So it's like I'm kind of I almost need to increase now because it's gonna get hit later. I can't increase that much, and this is
get the new guys, get the new guys, and get the infill done, and get that side of the business up, and put the other people on a nice, safe plan. You know, that gets them moving, and that's, you know, to me. I mean, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. I'm not here to tell you how to do your business, and there's 1,000 ways to skin that cat, right? You know, I'm just saying from my approach, how I've done things is like, gosh, for those tenants that are already there, man, I promise you, if you heard the real life stories of how much pain they go through on a daily basis, it'd be nice if we as landlords, you know, could be kind of a safe haven for them that still gives them the leg up, still puts money in our pockets, still lets us do the cash flow kind of game that we like to play. But we take it out on the new guy, not the old guy. You know, that's for better or worse.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. So that's good. So I know you mentioned you're doing deals in 15 states. So I think you're in the Southeast, but where's the rest of your team at, and where are you doing deals? I mean, are you willing to do deals everywhere or?
Everywhere. We do deals everywhere. You know, so through Marcus and Miller Chap, it's, you know, we have 80-something offices around the country, you know, thousands and thousands of real estate agents working their tail off, and they're a remarkable company. They have some of the hands down best real estate brokerage minds I've ever met in ever, you know. And so, but the way that my team works, okay, and all of us are kind of interconnected with the way it works, but like most places, we're still competitors, and, you know, they have their pocket listings, and I got my pocket listings and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, we kind of don't collaborate as much as I would like to see, but we probably collaborate more than any other brokerage office out there. Yeah. But for my team, I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is on the coast, you know, here in the South. But then I have a guy in Tampa who's my partner, Charles DeHart, and he's the man. He's hands down one of the best minds in this industry, and he's gone through a lot of up and downs to learn what he knows. And him and I, we kind of are the strategy guys on my team, and we broker most of the deals, but everything comes through us, and then we give it to the guys on my team. We have guys in Charleston, Atlanta, Seattle, Los Angeles. And so we have a pretty big network. I'm trying to bring somebody else up on the Northeast for now. That's mostly me dealing with that stuff for one of my other teammates. But basically between that, we help capital migrate from, you know, Seattle to Florida and from New York to Texas, you know. Right. And that's that's a big way of how we're able to push markets. We just closed the deal yesterday in Little Rock, Arkansas, at a 4 cap for a value add.
Wow.
And, that's a nuts number. But man, it makes sense on that deal. This guy's going to make good money once he implements the upside that we've kind of outlaid for him. And so we have a lot of crossover with how we do it. And of course, this industry like I do, there's not a lot of people in it. There's a lot of people coming here, but there's not actually a lot of people here yet. And, it's pretty easy to get known in our industry by having a big enough reach. And, we have 12, 13,000 people in our buying database. And, we've got, 50,000 something parks, all around the country, and 20,000, full complete details on. And so between having that information and the conversations that we've been tracking for a decade now between all the park owners, it gives us a good idea of how people behave in an acquisition or a disposition, and we build profiles around that. So we can kind of see how one group their purchasing behavior in Florida would suggest that, when a broker's not involved, they would only pay X amount. But if we get a broker involved, we can get that same buyer group up to a different number. And that usually, 100% of the time beats whatever we make on a deal. And so we're able to use that as a value proposition for a lot of the clients that we work with. And from a buyer standpoint, there's no other brokerage company that I know of that's got better data than we do. So you can really kind of see where the market's going. And when you overlay one market on top of another market, you can kind of see, hey, if this is happening here, it's only a matter of time before it's happening there. And we can kind of figure out where that rent curve really is going to start happening and where the velocity of these transactions are going to be happening, and bringing people from our industry or from apartments or single family homes or from, whatever, Wall Street type of markets into these new markets ahead of time, where they're willing to pay more to get there.
Right.
And at the same time, they're okay with the risk and the return aspect of it as we help them compile a larger portfolio and things like that.
No, it makes sense. Seems like a good approach. I know I'm seeing lots of new people enter the space, lots of new capital, lots of new buyers. Is that what you're seeing? And as a result, I feel like the cap rates are just getting lower and lower, and I don't know when they're going to get to the level of, the peak.
Cap rates are irrelevant, in my opinion, okay? Because a value-added cap rate, big deal. So this 4 cap I just sold in Little Rock, that's going to be a 10 cap before you know it, it's going to be. You have to implement the upside. There's a deal we just looked at, and right before this call, I was evaluating a deal in Western North Carolina. The guys had $100 lot rents. It's a 2.5 cap on purchase, okay? Because it's $100 lot rents, but it's a nice sized park. And that thing's going to be like a 25 cap by the time that thing's fully maximized, So the cap rate to me is irrelevant for value add. On stabilized, it's much more relevant. But at the same time, the real factor that adjusts that cap rate from a broker standpoint is, we're balancing off of what the interest rate is going to be for that deal from the financing side. Right. So, typically most of our buyers, going back to that buyer profile we were talking about, we understand what kind of returns they need based off of their purchasing behavior with or without brokers, things like that. And typically what you're looking for is a spread between the interest rate and the cap rate to match the type of risk that's involved. So that might be a 1%, a 1 point spread. It might be a 3 point spread. And somewhere around 2.5 points, 3 points, it becomes like a 20% IRR almost all the time. Right. When you get above that, it becomes a much higher IRR. But with the higher IRR, you're definitely going to have probably more risk. Or that the broker that is selling that park or the seller that's selling that park mispriced their park probably. Because if agency debt's available and you have a 5 point spread between your interest rate and the cap rate, if I was a seller and I found that out, I would be mad at my broker for pricing that way, and if I'm a broker, if you're pricing that way, you're going to fall behind the curve. And the value add stuff with bridge loans out there, which we know are pretty much a thing that are absolutely critical to helping these value adds get to the next phase of financing, is, those guys need such a low DCR, and we can keep that spread in there on that interest only for that first set of, equations on the P&L. And so you have to know how to do it. And that's how we kind of, so the cap rate, it is going to get more aggressive. It's going to, right? Unless if interest rates go up, then our cap rates are going to decompress. But we have all this interest coming into our industry. We are the safest industry right now to invest in. We've had almost no fallout from COVID. Okay. I would imagine your story is the same here, that your collections are probably pre-COVID levels right now.
Right.
you're probably thinking about pushing rents. You're probably thinking about increasing occupancy right now. Not too many industries can say that. So supply demand, I mean, that's what all it boils down to, right? And anytime there's risk in the world, people flock to a safe haven. Right now, we're looking really safe. And with interest rates incredibly low, it's the aggregators are just having a field day right now as they go around and consolidating all these parks around the country. And I mean, I've sold thousands of units just to single brand new people in 1 year already, because that's what these guys are doing, and they're not stopping. I mean, we got people with $500 million funds coming in that aren't institutions. Okay. We have, real players coming in, and then we have all these sponsors coming in from the back end saying, I don't want to touch a park, but I want to go give a guy a bunch of money to go buy a bunch of parks, and that's happening a lot too. So today's still a good value, in my opinion, because a 6 cap or a 5 cap is still a good number overall, and we're going to have better returns because it's never about the day one cap. We're not like an industrial building that's got a corporate guarantee, and your 5 cap is a 5 cap for that whole lease term or whatever, with maybe half-point increments every 5 years. Right. We're not that. We know a 5 cap today is definitely not a 5 cap tomorrow, and that's why you're seeing more coming in. And if you have the money and you have the time and endurance, buying parks right now is still real good. We're not going to see blood in the water, I don't think, for a while. It's going to have to hurt a lot worse out there before we start seeing any significant blood in our water.
No, I agree, and I think people are paying more and more for the upside, as you mentioned, because again, I agree with you on the value add. I mean, I bought a deal a year ago. The cap rate was infinite, right? There was zero NOI. I mean, even this guy had a $2.5 million investment, and he had no debt. He had cash in it, and they couldn't even cash flow. Okay, they were just mismanaging it. They had 11 people on the payroll. They should have had 2 or 3 total. So was I a fool that paid a 1 cap or an infinite cap, or no? I was doing it for the upside, right? So I definitely agree with you. My bigger concern with the interest rate stuff is people are going to get stuck in these deals longer than they want, because the low interest rates of that spread you're talking about, they're making some of the deals make sense economically. If you can get 2.5% agency debt, you can buy a 4.5, 5 cap park. But if interest rates go up, which I'm not sure they will, but if interest rates go up to say 4 or 5%, you're kind of stuck in that deal, because the guy if you're going to sell to the next guy, he can't get 2.5% debt. He's going to need 4.5% debt, and you're going to know that's the valid market, and that's going to push the valuation down. So if you had a 5-year pro forma with an exit strategy, you may have to push off the disposition.
Absolutely.
So you prepaid your principal, which is going to take 10 and 15 years, and that's a long hold period for a lot of these guys.
It is. That's part of the risk reward in this whole industry. And with interest rates right now, the Feds are telling us, hey, we're going to keep them, artificially low for the foreseeable future. So, we know we got a couple of years probably of having pretty strong or low interest rates, if you will. But, like when I bought my park, my interest rate was like 7.5% or something insane, and like it was hard. It was hard to pay the monthly nut on that thing. But as you grow your rents sustainably, and the market has more demand than supply, you're still going to find your balance. But the days of doubling your money in 3 years, I'm hoping those days are ending in this industry, because it's bringing such the wrong type of element into our industry, where people are getting too aggressive with the rent pushes and doing things like that, because they're just looking at it as a flip and fix, or fix and flip. And that's the wrong element from an ownership standpoint. I know I go against the grain with this on a lot of investors and other even brokers, but to me, the industry is more important than some independent investor, getting rich quick. I think that's just not what we need to be focusing on as advocates of affordable housing for our industry, when America needs affordable housing so terribly bad. And, if you're an advocate of affordable housing and you're sitting on piles and piles of vacant lots, then are you really an advocate of affordable housing, or are you more of a straight capitalist and you're trying to make your buck off of some poor people? And hey, I'm not saying which is right or which is wrong, just call it what it is. And if you're trying to influence the affordable housing kind of institution that's out there and make it stronger and make it so everybody has a roof over their head, and I think you almost have to take it on yourself as a park owner with the vacancies that you have to utilize that before you start, like I said in the beginning, start squeezing everybody else, especially your legacies.
Right. No, I think the infill strategy is the way to definitely solve that affordable housing
That's
gap.
where the money's at, man. That's where the
Oh,
money's at for you. You know,
exactly.
it's a win-win. You know.
Exactly. I mean, and I'm under contract on a park here in Missouri, and I met the seller out there, and he drove his Porsche to the mobile home park. I was like, "What are you doing?" And this is a very downtrodden park, big time value add, really rough. And I was like, "Why are you rolling in here in a Porsche?" And my business partner said he had a different Porsche last time I was here. He has multiple Porsches, and I was just like, so then I go tour these park owned homes. There's a single mom with three boys, and she's telling us all these, are you maintenance? You know, can you fix this? Look, my water heater, look, it's got a hot wire sitting there in the water. She has to jimmy rig the hot water heater to take a shower. And she goes, I talked to the boss, but he said he's got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
And she has she has two mattresses in each bedroom, one in each bedroom. No sheets, no pillow, no bed frame.
Yeah.
And there's four of them. So like somebody is either A, sleeping with mom, or B, sleeping in the chair. And the guy in the Porsche can't fix the hot wire. I'm just like, I'm not sure if we're going to close on that deal because I just had found some sewer problems today. But if we do end up closing on that deal, they're going to love me because like, I mean, also now I got to budget a bunch more deferred maintenance on the park owned homes because I know there's stuff that he hasn't fixed. But like the guys like that are the guys that are going to give us our industry a bad reputation, bring in more
You
government
gotta get those
regulation,
guys out.
and it's just it makes the deal harder and harder. So I think I'm with you on the philosophy, but that's good. Well, I got another question for you, Glenn. So I know when you're dealing with a $30 million park, it's not your small time new buyer. Maybe it's a new fund or new private equity group. But what about for the smaller buyers that are trying to buy their first deal? What tips do you have for them? Because you got a busy dance card. You're probably gonna answer the call on the $30 million deal more than the 300,000. But there's smaller deals for other folks, not even that be small. What can a new guy do to get on your radar and get a
So,
time of day?
absolutely. So I return every email and every call. I give everybody the time of day. If you're the new guy, I love talking to you. It's okay. I might not give you all my time, but I'm going to give you some time. I'm going to hear you out, and I'll probably bring you over to one of my other agents on my team, and they might pick up the slack from that point. But for us, like I said, I don't care if you're buying a $300,000 park or a $30 million park, you're going to get top of the line service from anybody on my team because that's just the most important thing to us is making sure you're making a good deal. Now, there's a ton of parks out there, right now available for $1 million plus or minus. And the things that you have to understand on your first park, especially on your first park, is, man, there's a couple absolutes you have to understand getting these things. Is location is still the number one rule in real estate, guys. And so you might not be able to buy in downtown, LA or downtown Houston, but if you're trying to buy locally, still buy in the best possible location locally that you can. In my case, I bought in the worst location, and it was far in the middle of nowhere. And that was a real pain in the butt to sell at the end when I was finally done with that project because and the location sucks. And I didn't get the crazy run up in values that these other parks were getting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So location. And within the location, understand the municipality, man, because a lot of these municipalities, you don't want to get bed with them. They're just going to throw wrench after wrench after wrench at you, especially if you're not a local. And they're going to come at you with all sorts of things that you didn't know to ask when you were going through your due diligence because these kind of sound like, why the hell would I even think to ask them these questions until they throw the wrench at you and you realize that, oh man, I should ask that question. Things like, if the park's not in the city limits, is there any plans to get it annexed into the city limits because that's going to affect your taxes? They might make you hook up from a private utility system to a public utility system, and that can be extremely expensive. There's those kind of things you need to ask the municipality. You want to figure out if they're friendly or if they're not. Of course, if you show up and you say, hey, I got a business plan and this is what I'm trying to do. I want to turn this slum hole into, something real nice. And this is my plan. Will you work with me? And they start giving you some ideas of what to do. That's a good sign. But you got to talk to permitting. You got to talk to zoning. You got to talk to all the different aspects of the municipality because that's what most people forget to do. And then they just don't understand how painful that is, especially when it comes to things like grandfathering, the grandfather clause, and a lot of these parks not being, conforming zoning and things like that. So if you don't know how to ask that stuff, which why would you, because most of the time you don't have to think about that when you're buying a house or something,
Right.
And so you have to learn to ask these, and your broker should be able to at least give you a generic idea of what you should be asking. A guy like you, Ferd, should be able to give them really good guidance on the stuff that they're supposed to be asking. Attorneys are great at this kind of stuff. So don't be penny wise, pound foolish, and not buy it. Bring an attorney to the table with first part. Man, it's so foolish. But a lot of guys do it because like, oh, it's a couple $1,000 and I'm smart enough. I know what to do.
Right.
And then
People,
the municipality comes down.
I get those calls all the time. There's like, hey,
Oh,
I'm closing on Tuesday. Can you just do the closing statement? And I'm just like, do you have an operating agreement? Do you have a zoning letter? Did you get a phase one? What'd you do in your survey? Do you make title objections? I'm like, no, I just need help with I need like a bill of sale or like a deed. It's like, you need a lot more help. Man. And then some guys call me. I have one broker referred a couple clients to me, and the clients will call me like, yeah, I didn't think about any of this stuff beforehand, but like the city now says I can't bring in new houses. The city now says I have setbacks. What's a setback? What?
Yep.
It's like,
that's the big one. That's the one they get you on.
Some of the stuff like I can't help you at this point. I'm just like, I don't even turn down the client. Like, this is, you're gonna have to
Too late.
And you're talking about 2 or 3 lots. It's not gonna be worth suing. So,
yeah, and it's like, yeah, you could win after a year or 2 or 3 of arguing with these guys, spending tons of money, or you can comply and you're going to lose a few lots.
Yeah.
I just went through that experience with the guy in Charleston, South Carolina. It was like a 40-something space park. He bought it thinking, hey, 40 spaces is 40 spaces, and he had some junker homes in there. He pulled one of the homes out, wanted to bring a new home in. Hey, here comes the city. Hey, guess what you're going to have to do now, because you just voided all your grandfather, and you can sue us, but like I said, it's going to take a few years, and it's still going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. He ended up losing from 40-something spaces to 30-something spaces at his park, and and you had to do a full redo. I mean, a full redo, and $12,000, $13,000 a space to recomply now. Like, it's a painful lesson to learn because you forgot to ask that municipality that question. The next most important thing is the tenant base. Is understand the kind of tenant base that you got in there. And, a lot of these mom and pops, we ain't got no leases half the time. It's usually just like hey, I had $500 and I moved in and I've lived here ever since, and it might not, the seller may or may not be the most honest person. And they'll tell you, hey, this guy, Johnny in 5 pays 200. This guy in number 4 pays 300. And there's no real track record of, because they're not depositing the money in the bank, because maybe they're living off of the income, and there's no leases. So you have to do estoppel letters, and that's going to sound like communism to them. So they're going to run for the hills, and it's going to be a very confrontational type of thing. But maybe they're all great tenants and everything's above board. But you have to get to know these tenants a little bit. I really advise spending some time in the park, doing your estoppel letters, knocking on doors, saying hello to these guys. Hey, is this actually what your rent is? Do you have this, that, or the other I should know about? And get that kind of down, because there's a lot of people that may not just tell you what you need to know. They'll only tell you what they want you to know. And you have to learn to dig with the municipality and with the tenants. And then the financing. Holy moly, is the financing hard on these things, And so. Don't come into this industry thinking you're getting into this for 10 or 20%. It's 90% of the time that ain't gonna happen. 95% of the time that ain't gonna happen. It's gonna be probably 30 or 35% on your first deal. Maybe 25% if you got a nice local bank that's doing good deals for you. But if you're trying to get good agency debt, it's probably going to be something in that 30 to 35%.
Well, getting agency debt is going to be unrealistic for most for
a first-time buyer. Yeah, exactly.
Experience. I mean, that they're going to let you even sign the bad boy provision, so you have to.
Yeah.
Recourse.
I mean, CMBS sometimes. Community banks, so they're a bit easier, but they'll tell you, yeah, we'll do this deal for you. Well, yeah, I know we love mobile home parks until it goes to committee. And those guys are like, we don't touch trailer parks, no way, and it's like, reevaluate this thing at a 20 cap, and then that's what we'll end on it. And you're like, well, what are you talking about? Like, you said you would do it. And then all of a sudden you pissed everybody off in the deal. The deal's blown up. You've lost your escrow and things like that. So you want to be.
Go ahead, sorry.
I just say you want to be very upfront with the financing. When you first start looking at a deal, go get that soft quote, get somebody to kind of verify you, make sure you're capable, make sure you got reserves. I don't even think you should invest in anything for that matter, but especially this industry, until you have at least 6 to 12 months of just living reserves for yourself and your family. Because like before you know it, you can get into a deal, the city comes and says, hey, there's an unpaid thing of $30,000, or hey, you got all this underground work that is now a problem, and here's a $100,000 bill to fix it. And there goes like you're gonna have problems, So you want to have this reserve built up. That's something a lot of people forget to do. Those 4 or 5 things. That's what I would say. If you can at least cover that base as getting yourself initiated in this industry, you're going to come out better than the guy who did it. That's for sure.
No, those are just good tips, kind of lessons from school, hard knocks. I've got a client now that the buying entity, I go, you're going to create an LLC? They go, no, we're just going to use our retirement account. So they're not only do they not have the savings, they're like, they don't have liquid savings to live on. They're pledging their retirement account. I was like, you guys, that's a lot of eggs in one basket. But that's the only way they can afford to get in. So like, I'm not trying to tell you how to run your life, but you just need to be aware that this is not all
scary.
Rainbows and candy canes here. I mean, and I want to make a comment on the bank approval stuff too. I think that's really good. I like to have more than one bank looking at every deal, look at good banking relationships. But because I had a deal that it was a bank that I had over $2 million of balance with them. And when you have over 2 million, you got to go to committee. This is a Kansas City bank. I had to go to committee. It was in a different city. Well, that bank, I had to go to the regional committee, and they approved my loan 7-0. This was for a deal out of state. Okay, great. So I moved forward. Earnest money went firm, paid for the appraisal, everything was good. Well, it comes time to fund the loan, and the CEO, apparently, unbeknownst to me, has veto power. I was like, the local branch 7-0 committee, the regional branch, which had like 2 or 3 of the local guys on the regional branch statewide, they voted 7-0, and the CEO said, oh, that's in a blue state. I don't like high taxes. I don't like blue states. I'm going to veto it. So I have no idea. People in the local committee didn't know. I'm sitting here 10 days out from closing. My earnest money is firm, and it was like $50,000 earnest money. So it wasn't $1,000, and I'm about to be screwed. It's like, so luckily I had another bank that I've done business with that was able to step up at the last minute, and the bank one was kind enough to reassign the appraisals to bank 2. They didn't have time to order new appraisals, and I can't give them indirectly, and I can't just give them a PDF. So I ended up getting it done. But had I not had 2 banking relationships with local banks, I'd have been screwed and then lost that deal and lost a bunch of money.
Absolutely. It's just like anything else. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Have some backup options. It's like if you're going to the doctor, you're not going to take the doctor's, this one doctor's thing about this disease you all of a sudden have, Like you're going to go get a couple other quotes, you're going to say, doc, what else, what else? And in finance, with getting the finance and stuff, I'm appreciative of guys like you who want to go deal with the banks yourself and go do, pick up the phone 100 times, find the one bank that will finance that.
Yeah.
But man, I personally think of brokers, not the real estate broker, but the mortgage broker is one of the best resources for our industry. And we got some really capable mortgage brokers in our industry that really understand how to turn the bolts and get things done. And, that's you're going to pay a half a point or a point or a point and a half or whatever it might be. But the time value headache, you know what I mean? When you're spending all that time going through the lesson you just went through just to get to the finish line and be told psych, it's
right.
Like, boy, that's painful. Whereas the mortgage broker probably would have seen that happening and probably advised, a different strategy with that particular bank. It's just like people tell me all the time, oh, I got BB&T to say, yeah, I'm going to do this loan with you. And it's like, BB&T stopped lending on this, asset class for a few years. And, the 3 deals that they've closed in the last 1 year, there's only 3 deals, so it's like, you have to kind of pay attention. I'm just making up a bank. I'm not picking on BB&T, but it's like that type of thing. The real estate broker should have some good insight as to the capability of the person or the institution financing the park, and your mortgage broker should have just an immense amount of data on who gets stuff done and who doesn't get stuff done. The local banks, they're there to fill a thing, but boy, they like to tease you. They really like to tease you. And then they come back with an appraisal that makes no damn sense sometimes. And you have to go back to them and be like, I've sold 10 parks within 100 miles of this park. Here's those comps. Why aren't those comps on your reports that are showing, like this should be a 15 cap instead of a 7 cap? What do you guys do?
Oh, you can't argue with the appraisers. You can't win. I had a deal where I sold 2 parks in this exact city the year prior. Only one of those 2 parks showed up on the comp of 10 comps. They were going like Indiana and stuff. I was like, I have 2. In fact, the bank that had the loan on them is the same bank I'm asking for a loan now. So you knew about this. And one of them, it was all park-owned homes. So a good portion of the allocated value was on the homes.
Sure.
The appraiser only looked at the real estate component that was at the county recorder deeds office. So the comp that he used was half the value of the park.
50% of the value.
That half comp to comp out my new park I was trying to buy, and ended up missing the appraisal. Like, you almost never miss the appraisal. Like, I had to put like $45,000 extra cash in to make the appraisal.
So frustrating. So frustrating. Yeah, we've gotten into the habit of calling up the appraisers and the banks and arguing with them until we're blue in the face. And we just went through that on a deal in North Carolina, and they're like, "Oh, but it's only worth 75% of the value you're saying." And we showed them we had to go through it so many times, and they came up to about 90% of the value that we were.
That's good. You got them to change.
You have to argue with them, and you have to, really be willing to just, poke them. Be like, yeah, here's all the facts, guys, and you're missing the ball here. And I'm going to tell everybody in this industry not to use you as a bank. So relook at this appraisal, And that's sometimes what you got to do. And that's where brokers really come in handy. My team, other teams, and competitor teams, I don't care, but use a broker, and because those guys get in front of things because they're incentivized to go and make sure this deal gets to the finish line, and that's kind of what you need when you're just winging it yourself, especially as a new guy, which is exactly what I did. And like, oh, hey, can you get me a closing statement tomorrow? That was me, 20 years ago. And that's like, just, boy, that's just how you open yourself up to exposure is not using the professionals in our field, which there's some really good professionals in our field to protect you against these risks. Yeah, it costs a little bit more, but like the downside is way more than what we would have cost, especially in your case as an attorney. It's like it's like who would not use an attorney on a real estate transaction?
It's crazy. Lots of people. About half the transactions I'm involved with, there's no attorney on the other side.
Oh, that's the same with us. It's crazy.
It's unbelievable.
Like, you guys are negotiating this contract without an attorney. Get in the way, and they want to do all these legalese changes, and it's like, yeah,
it's your advocate. And attorneys can ruin a lot of deals. Don't get me wrong, but it's like you probably at least have somebody looking at it for you. But people do it all the time. But, anyway, Glenn, this is great. Where can people find you? I know where to find you, but how can people get a hold of you to get your opinion on it?
I'm super easy to find. You can go to my website, which is themhpexpert.com, or my brokerage site, which is EstersonMHCteam.com. But if you just go on to LinkedIn and type in Glenn Esterson, or in Google type in Glenn Esterson, you'll pull me up. I mean, we're extremely easy to get a hold of. Anybody on my team, very capable people, and me and Charles are behind them, helping them with every aspect of it. And, on my website, you can see all the team guys and contact them directly. We're here to help. We don't charge nothing. We don't pay, hourly attorney fees. We're here just to help. And the only time you're going to pay us is if you're a seller in a transaction that we helped you get to the finish line. So, that's free resources. You need rent comps. You need, an evaluation of the park you're thinking about selling, or the park you're thinking about buying. That's where we come in, and we really have the data to help you be very confident, even if you don't use us as your broker, and that's okay, to be confident that you're going to be not leaving money on the table, or at least, having a good strategy to offset the excessively low cap rates that you're probably facing right now. And so use us as a resource. That's what we're here for. EstersonMHCteam.com.
All right. Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate it.